You can get going. Sound
Sure.
good?
Sure, sounds good.
All righty, sounds great. Okay. E.J. Edney graduated from the University of Mississippi in 2011 with a Bachelor of Arts in Biology with minors in Chemistry and Psychology. In 2013 with a Master's of Arts in Higher Education/Student Personnel, and in 2019 with his Doctor of Education in Higher Education. He currently serves as the Director of the Center for Inclusion and Cross-Cultural Engagement at the University of Mississippi, where he works to enhance efforts to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. EJ's work and research focuses on mentoring and its capacity to affect issues of equity and access for marginalized student groups. His work has received numerous awards, including the Donald Cole Award for Excellence in Mentoring in 2016 from the University of Mississippi Black Student Union and the Laws Innovation Award from the University of Mississippi School of Education in 2018. EJ has worked in various areas on campus, which provided him a broad set of experiences. Prior to joining the CICCE staff, EJ served as program coordinator for the Lucky Day Scholarship Success Program and as coordinator for National Panhellenic Council fraternities and sororities. EJ's professional experiences have helped him galvanize his passion for supporting and promoting equitable access to student success. As such, he has been a consistent fixture on numerous committees and working groups assembled to approach issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. EJ is a mentor, scholar, educator, and leader. He is also a proud father to Norris Rocky Edney IV and Nora Eden Edney, and life partner to Adrian Edney. Please help me in welcoming EJ.
Hello. Thank you so much, Caroline, for that introduction. And thanks to Alexis for the invitation to come and join you all. I'm so grateful for this space. And I can't imagine starting a conversation with Ole Miss Women's Council Scholars without first acknowledging that it played a huge role in me getting to where I am today. Certainly the mentoring relationships that I gained through Ole Miss Women's Council Scholarship are still there. I'm still so grateful for the way that folks poured into me and created those opportunities for me to study at the University of Mississippi. Well, again, really grateful. Certainly don't want to invite myself into your homes and intrude, but it would be great to be able to relate with you all to the extent that this virtual platform allows us to. So if we can be camera facing as much as possible, if it's not an intrusion, I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk to you all today just about identity exploration. This is a presentation that I think is foundational for us to really, move forward in thinking more and understanding more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I don't want to own it today. I've got some things put together that I think are important for us to cover. But I'm going to ask for a couple of things. The first is for Alexis to send me a digital nudge under the table when I have about 15 minutes left so I can wrap it up. The other is just for you all to help steer the conversation. In your engagement with me, there are several points built out in the presentation where I will ask you to just kind of share out, and that will be really helpful. But also in using the chat to let me know, hey, you're off base, or hey, I want to pause right here and explore that idea a little bit more. These presentations work so much better when we can have that type of sense of reciprocity. Also, when I'm in front of a group like this, I just want to also just say that some of you all will have already gained a lot of the knowledge that I'm going to share with you all today. For some folks, it may be very new things. And so I'll ask that everybody approach today's conversation with an open mind as well. So with all of that framework laid, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get into the presentation. And this never happens as smoothly as I imagined it. Now a year into the panini that we are all trying to figure out together. But bear with me. So this presentation is generally given by our I team. That's a team of student leaders who really care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have some skills and kind of having those discussions with other student groups. And we'd like to start by just, I like to admit that, when I'm having these discussions with groups, I make some assumptions about people's intentions. And I think it's really important that start out just by making sure that these assumptions are safe for us to make. Anytime you're entering into a discussion and you have a set of expectations that's different from somebody else's, there's a chance there for some conflict. So these are the things that I'm expecting out of this group at invitation to come and discuss about these things. I'm hoping that everybody's here to gain understanding, and that we will clarify our understanding with questions. I'm watching the chat. If there's a need for us to spend some more time on something, absolutely. If you leave this presentation, or if we get to a portion of it and you're like, man, I really need to learn more about that, take responsibility for your own learning. That's an important part of this as well. Respect, having a very high level of respect for each other. And the lived experiences that we bring to the table is also, that's just a ground rule. It's an absolute. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's something that we're going to do in this space in order to make sure that it is conducive as possible to what we're trying to share together. I'll ask that we keep an open mind as well, being open to exploring new ideas, that we watch our nonverbal communication. Again, I can't set the tone for how masterclass sessions go, but to the extent that you're comfortable, being front facing is helpful. But certainly, as you get into the discussion, if someone says something or something like that, that's probably not the most appropriate time to go camera off, or to have a facial expression that disinvites further comments. And then speaking from your own experience, I'm going to do my best to not say they or y'all or we, because I don't have authority to speak on any we. I don't have authority to speak on any y'all. I can only really speak on my own experiences, and I'm going to do my best to do that. I ask that you all do the same as we're engaging. Here, I like to pause and see if there's anything else that people need in order to participate fully in this conversation. So if anybody sees anything missing, this is your chance to let me know before we go forward, and I'll do my best to respect that if there's something else that you need in order to participate fully in the conversation. Okay, cool. So I'm not seeing any. I think it's a pretty good list. I don't get people adding things often, but again, I hope you all understand and appreciate the value of us just making sure that we have this understanding before we move forward. All right. So I'll ask that if you want to ask a question, if you want to stop, I can, start moving really quickly. You can type the word stack in the chat. It lets me know what order you are, and I can come to you. And then, I've said this one enough times, so it's fine if you all don't, but being present as much as possible. I think it's also important for us to say, okay, well, what is it that I hope you gain from today's experience together? And I hope that you're able to define some terms, that you're able to understand facets of individual identity and their relationship with other folks, and then learn and practice strategies for embracing diversity and difference here at the university. And the framework for our conversation today is that, is really foundational. We are in this green box today, but not to stay there, not just to become more aware of our own identities, but because it's in understanding our own identities and the values that we ascribe to those identities because of those lived experiences, our understanding of our diversity, of our culture, the identities, the biases that we have, the perspectives and what informs those perspectives. That's the only real way that we can think about ourselves in relation to other folks, right? And start to appreciate things like inclusion and appreciation, privilege, and inequities and allyship. And I don't know that we can really start to affect systems, these larger systems of oppression or difference or privilege or any of those other terms. I don't know if we can effectively navigate those or dismantle those if we don't understand ourselves in relation to other folks and ultimately ourselves. And so hopefully this lays out why it's important for us to start and really explore our own personal identities, because again, it makes us more aware of ourselves in relation to other people and ultimately more equipped to be able to affect systems. Before I move further, I know that people have varying degrees of a relationship with the Center for Inclusion. So we were established in 2014. We are really interested in establishing programs and services that help the university actualize this commitment to inclusiveness. We try to keep the conversation going about topics that are relevant to the day, and we try to create a supportive, a collaborative campus environment that really complements co-curricularly the academics experience and engages students with the university community. So we do that through mentor programs and programs like keynote speakers for identity, heritage months and things like this. Lots of different things come out of the Center for Inclusion. Here are some examples. So our Black History Month keynote, our allies training, we do an event for our men of color called the Barbershop Talk, where there's literally a barber up there as we're talking about things that people bring up in barbershops. We do immersive trips, like taking groups of students to museums and really go into place and immersing ourselves in the history of that place. Certainly have a lot of different discussions about these topics. And I think, it was weighing on my head heavy whether I even wanted to continue today's presentation, because along that vein, something that's really contemporary right now and I think deserves a lot of our attention is the violence that we've seen Asian people and women in particular being subjected to, and this uprise in violence against Asian folks. And we'll have a chance to kind of investigate some of that as we're thinking about our own identities as we move forward. But here I just want to pause and not move past the gravity of that situation. And not necessarily to invite conversation at this one moment, but just to be sure that you all see that as something that we would be doing and advancing that conversation, and just to acknowledge the humanness of that moment. Before we just get into some technical jargon about what the center does or how we should explore our own identities. Today, one of those things that I'm really thinking about is how prominent our Asian friends and family and community members are really thinking about their identity in this space, and what are we doing in order to make them feel included. I say that one of the learning outcomes was for us to be able to define some terms. So let's try that. And I've given you a little cheat there. Here's the first time I'm going to test to see if my camera off people are actually paying attention and if they're engaged. I'm going to ask that we define some terms. No need to be nervous at all. I want to see if anybody has an operational definition for diversity. You can type in the chat stack, or you can just unmute yourself and give me a definition for diversity. I have 2 degrees in education, and am very, very comfortable with the silence. I know that people are processing and wanting to get their thoughts together. So I'll pause until someone takes us up on it.
Did you say we could just unmute ourselves?
Mhm.
Okay. Diversity for me, like the first thing that comes to mind is just the word like differences. So that's like immediately what pops into my head.
Yeah, I think that is an important aspect of it, right? Because it's hard to have a diversity of individuals without having some difference, right, between those individuals. So great perspective there. Anybody else, anything to add on diversity? I see Sam Haskell has put in representation. That's not Sam Haskell though, is it? All right. Representation, absolutely. We want to be sure that as we think about diversity, those differences, right, are represented. I think that those two work together well. That I figured, and I'm sure they've had a chance to meet you as well. I certainly have. It's nice to see you. Others on diversity, or do you feel like it's already been covered? What you would have said has been covered. Can I get a reaction? Maybe if you all want to move forward, if you don't have anything. Okay, great.
I'll add one thing, I guess. The one thing I think is like just like recognizing like the differences, like recognizing everyone's different in some way. So kind of off of Carol's, but just like recognizing and acknowledging that we're not all the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what your definition really illustrates how these concepts bleed together and how they kind of overlap and interplay with each other. They have their nuances, but they're also quite similar as well, because I'd argue that you edge into the definition for inclusion, right? Making sure that all of those differences and the people who have those differences are included in our spaces. And then there's also this concept of equity that I think is foundational to our conversation. I'm wondering if anybody will take a shot at giving me a definition for equity. So equity is firmly identified with the understanding that people's lived experiences, dictate their needs, right? And this can be related to lots of different things. Most of us, as we were growing up, as we were in grade school, for instance, didn't pick our zip code, right? And probably didn't have this much of a sense for how much our zip code dictated our educational outcomes, right? And if that's true, and it's true across the board, and there are other layers that affect that of who can be in what zip codes and who can afford to be in those and all these different things, then it means that people are going to show up to college with different needs as well, right? That's one example. Y'all, I'm going to need a whole lot more time. If the goal is for me to dunk, I'm gonna need a few months to get my legs in order and build up the strength that I need in order to do it. LeBron James just needs a ball, right? That's all he needs. He can just go do it right now. So if the goal is equity, if the goal is for us to dunk, what I'm gonna need in order to do that is a whole lot more intensive than what he's gonna need in order to do that, right? And so we got lots of different examples there about equity, but we can see that it's kind of informed by our lived experiences, by our attributes that we bring to the space. I didn't, look, yes, LeBron works extremely hard in order to have the physique and the ability that he has. And yes, I could probably dunk one day, right, if I worked at it hard enough. But he didn't earn being 6'7" and naturally under 15% body fat. That was genetic. You understand? So it's those types of things is the same similarity in where we stay. And so with that, I just wanted to see where our baseline definitions were. Thank you all for those who engaged. For those who didn't, I hope that the space is welcoming and warm enough, and there'll be other opportunities as we move forward. But just to give you some of these definitions, diversity is the what, and inclusion is the how. So diversity, you see over here in this picture, all the different ingredients that are listed there. Inclusion, though, they are now arranged in this way that we can recognize a little bit differently. Diversity, all the pieces are here. Inclusion, they're all working together. So diversity is just the acknowledgement that people are different from one another. And unfortunately, we've spent a lot of time just getting difference here on our campus, in our organizations and things like that. I don't know if we've moved as far as to say, to show a commitment to inclusion and making sure that those differences don't limit people's access or opportunities. Equality and equity, again, same thing. The goal here is to ride a bike, but you can see that if we give the same thing to everyone, it makes that kind of difficult. And so focusing on the goal and then anticipating and addressing the barriers to those goals is the concept of equity. All right, and then this concept of intersectionality, meaning that none of us are any one thing at one time. What I mean by that is, like, I can't just come in front of a space and just be male. I can't just come in front of a space and just be a Black man. I'm all of the things, all of the different lived experiences that I have all at once, and all of them affect how I move through the world. And so these are dozens and even hundreds of identities. And this just describes the overlap of those and how they can interplay to either enhance our privileges, so our identities that we have, that our privileged identities compound, just like those identities that we have that are not privileged identities. Those challenges that come with those also compound across intersectionality. And so the importance of self-awareness. Why is this so foundational to this discussion? Here's what I want everybody to do if you can. If you can't, you can type yourself a private chat or type it to me. I don't want it to be, burdensome for you. But I'd like for you to find a piece of paper or something to write on, or open up another tab for you to type in. And then I'd like for you to write down 3 important aspects of your identity from the following categories, and I'll leave this up for you to be able to study it. And then I'd like for you to write down 3 other identifiers or descriptors that are important to defining you. So mine might say parent, mine might say educator, right? And then the top it might say Black male, um, you know, cisgender. Um, the bottom one is more about identity spaces that I occupy. That top one is more about realities of my identity. Um, I'll pause for 2 minutes or so, give you all some time to think of these, and then we'll move into a reflection activity. I want to say before I pause and set my timer, that as we move into this next portion, it really will be important for us to feel comfortable and engaging. So as you're typing, if there is something that I could do in order to make it more inviting and get you more comfortable to participate as we move forward, please feel free to send me a private chat, and I'm happy to consider that as we move forward in the presentation. Thanks. Also, since everyone's not camera on, if you don't mind just typing in the chat when you're done, it'll let me know when we can move forward.
Did you say to send them to you in a private chat when we're done?
No, I thought that would be a good way of letting me know when you're done. I don't
Oh,
really
okay.
need to necessarily see what you put. I just want to keep track of everybody's progress.
Okay.
Thanks, Sam. All right, Sam, Jaden. All right. So I've got 3. All right, they're rolling in. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, that's the majority of us that are done. Thank y'all so much for engaging with that. We've got a couple of questions. Thanks, everybody. All right, so here's what I'd like for you to do. I've got a series of questions, and because we're a pretty small group, sometimes I would break us into small breakout rooms and we would think pair share, but I think you all are a small enough group to just engage, out, and I hope that this works. But I'd like for you all to just wrestle with this question. Which of your identities do you think about the most on a daily basis? And for those who want to speak on it, you can type the word chat and I will come to you, and you can unmute and just speak at that time. Which of those identities that you listed do you think about the most on a daily basis?
Hi, I'll go. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, awesome. I just want to apologize for camera off. The Wi-Fi in my apartment has not been great since the storm, but the identity that I definitely relate with or think about most is the fact that I'm a woman. I especially like recently, I don't know if any of you have seen this, but in England, a woman was killed by a police officer walking home. And I feel like stories like that happen so often that it's like forced me to think about the fact that I'm a woman. So yeah, not to bring down the room, but yes, that's what I think about.
No, that's thank you for sharing. And what you shared is first valid and a perfect example of why we create this space. So thank you for sharing. No need to apologize there. I think it's important for us to be able to share these perspectives. Who can relate? She shared some kind of trepidation there for sharing that as her opening. So let's uplift her by just saying, like, I get it, right? And I'll just say, of course, I don't have that identity, but I do this a lot and talk to a lot of groups, and what you shared is not uncommon. So thanks for being willing to share it. Others, identities that you put down, and or the one that you think about the most on a daily basis. So I'm recognizing our demographics tonight, and some of the silence might be because it's just amen, right? Like she hit the one that you think about the most. Is there anybody that has a different one, or one that is just as much, or maybe a close second? Go ahead.
I would say currently said I'm like young adult right out of college.
Okay.
I think about that pretty regularly, just trying to navigate not in college, but still in my college town. So it's been, yeah.
I'll retweet that for Carol. We talk about it a lot of just like it's a weird stage to be in life, period. And then Oxford's just like a whole other level of it
Yeah.
at times.
So what we think about in terms of our identity is informed by our life phase, like what's going on around us, about our environment, where we are, what's going on in that space, how we've primed ourselves to think about ourselves in that space. I think we can gather those things from what you all shared as well. I can certainly relate. I've only ever worked at the University of Mississippi. I remember graduating and having some uncertainty there. I'll pause and just tell you all a cool story. I struggled a lot when I decided to change my major. Thought that I was going to be a medical doctor for a really long time. Really struggled with that decision to change my major and take a different path. One of the things that happened on that path is I tried to figure out, okay, I'm not going to medical school anymore, so I'm not going to do this biochemistry degree. How can I still graduate on time? And that was to get a biology degree. And one of the only ways I could do that, I needed a 4-hour course. One of those courses that was offered was the course called Human Reproduction. I promise you, there's a point. I'm getting to it. The teacher in that course had delivered most of her children at home. She delivered the first one in a hospital, but the rest of her children, like I think 5 more, she delivered at home. And she talked to us about why and all the different things she did at home in order to have a more successful birth. In the hospital, you're not in the best position. There's drugs that they're putting in order to induce or strengthen labor. It's just not the best situation for the mother. She explained to us what the best situation was. And so ended up, I'm on a date one night with my partner, and I can tell that she's going into labor. And we go to the hospital. They strap her to some machines and everything, and they say yes, she's in labor, but the doctor's at home. She's not dilating. Y'all go home. Y'all come back tomorrow. This baby's coming tomorrow, but you'll be more comfortable at home. We go home, and before we left the hospital, I'm like, well, what do we need to know? What do I need to know in order to know if we need to come back? Because she seems like to think that we need to be here now. So I need to know, like, when is it really, time? She says if she thinks she needs to push, tell her no. And so I'm like, okay, cool. As soon as we get home, she's like, I think I need to push. And I'm like, don't do that. It's not like, we're not gonna do that. Let's get back to the hospital. Long story short, we show up to the hospital a few hours later with a healthy baby. Okay. Well, why do I tell you all that story? One reason when I'm talking to college students is that, you really you don't have a concept for like the different things that you have learned and why you learned them in that context. Because I would have never taken that course if I hadn't have had to change my major in order and figure out another path to graduation. I didn't know why I was taking it at that point. It was just the path of least resistance, but there's a lesson in it. And sometimes life reveals that later on. That's the first thing. But the other thing is like, let's think about that dynamic, that set of situations and all the different things the way those circumstances dictated how I think about our identities. You know, when we were on that date that night, when I was in the class, I thought most about being a student who had given up on their major. If I'm being frank, I thought about being a Black male who had given up on a dream of becoming a doctor, and what other people might think about that if they knew that that was the reason why I was no longer a biochemistry major. And I thought about that all the time when I was in my science classes, is if I belong there. And you know, the mentoring relationships that I had here were so important to that. I'm on the date, I'm thinking about myself as a future husband, as a partner, as someone who wants to be seen as marriage material. That's what was central to me then. As I'm in that hospital, what's most central is my advocacy. I consider myself an advocate. I wanted to really make sure that my partner had what she needed in that moment. When we got home, I thought about being a father for the first time, literally pulling my son, you know, delivering my son in our apartment. I thought about that. Now I think about, you know, I think about her. I do perspective taking, and I think about, you know, she told the doctors that she was hurting. You know, as we see mortality in different demographic groups increase because of, you know, a difference in appreciation when people are saying that they're hurting or they're in pain or this, I think about that. So I know that was a tangent. First, I didn't want to lose you all. I like telling that story to college students. It's the coolest thing that I've ever done. But the other part is that I think it really presents some opportunities for us to think about how our circumstances can dictate what's most central to us and important to us in our identities. I don't want to assume that there are other people who don't have them. Mary Haskell said, parent, grandparent, definitely think about that a lot. Margaret agrees. Shelby shared being a student. And Francina, is that right? Shared being a student as well, as some identities that are there. Anybody else have any that haven't been covered? Oh, I clicked, I'm sorry. So y'all see the next one. So this next thing that I'm gonna ask for you all to do is, I'd like for you to pick two of the identities on the sheet and reflect on a time when you were especially proud to identify as a member of one of those groups. Time when you were proud to have one of the identities that are on your page. Doesn't necessarily have to be different than the ones that you all listed in the chat. And share a story about those. All right, Shelby, sister, daughter, do you mind telling us more about a time when those identities made you proud?
Well, I'm just extremely close to my family, and I would say it's more so of the fact that I want to make them proud, which I am proud to be a sister and daughter, but a lot of the time I'm striving to make them proud and just do the right thing.
Deeply motivated by what would make them proud. I appreciate that. We gain so many of our values from our family backgrounds, and so I appreciate you raising that point. Others, identities in a time when you were particularly proud to have those identities.
I feel like I'm going a lot, but
Okay.
I'll do it. One of the ones I had on mine is educator. I'm not actually a teacher yet, but I, in the future, will teach math. But when I was student teaching, anytime I had a student who would like really struggle, and even just like one light bulb, it doesn't matter what it's on, like I always get so proud. I'm like, yes.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, being proud being, an educator being a central part of your identity, and that affirmation that you get when you get to see a student have a light bulb moment, I'm sure is very powerful. I can relate. Others, some of the identities that you listed and a time when you were particularly proud to have those identities. Mentor. Mary Pittman, do you mind saying a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I actually thought of that because not only in the Women's Council, but I got to be a peer mentor for an intro biology class to pre-med that is a particularly really hard class that I struggled into. So to be a mentor and to get to help people through that I already got through, and I know the importance of having someone to help you, it makes me really proud to see them excelling in something that I needed help into.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're working with Becky Samula.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good colleague of mine. Okay, so now I see somebody just came camera on. I have to assume that there's some commentary to follow. Was that why you came camera? Okay, cool. It's all right. I won't put you on the spot. Thanks though. Any other comments on identity and when you were proud to have that identity?
I'll go again. I'm really proud of being a daughter. I don't know, to me, it's kind of like passing on like the legacy of what my parents taught me and my grandparents and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I share a name with my father and grandfather, and that's always been a significant source of pride for me and responsibility as well. I was really proud to pass that on to my son too. So I can relate. I'm sure some of the other folks there can relate to how important it is, those family relationships, and making those folks proud has been to you. All right, so it's important for us to think about those identities in times when we're proud, situations where those identities make us proud. I think it's also important, though, for us to acknowledge that sometimes the identities that we have can come with some difficulties. So I'd like for you all to choose one or two of the identities that you have and reflect on a time when it was especially difficult to identify yourself in that group.
So EJ, this is Kelly Green. I'll go first. One of the items I put down was to identify myself was an American. And a time when it was difficult to identify myself was January 6th, and quite a few instances over the past year where we questioned, is this what America is all about? Is this what being an American means? And we know that's not the case. So there have been some, I would say embarrassing, probably one of the best words to use to describe that title over the last year, and even as late as yesterday. Things that are being done that are just in direct opposition to, I think, what most of us think of when we think of America and being American.
Thank you so much. Excellent, relevant points for sure. Definitely resonate with those a lot. I've thought a lot about what you shared recently, quite a bit, and who owns what it means to be, a citizen, a member of this group, and things that are being done in the name of it. And, we're supposed to be united under some of the same things. It's hard to reconcile someone else, espousing the same connection to justify their reasons for doing the things that they're doing. And I think, we have to create more spaces to be honest about that, to really challenge that, to talk about that. Because I think when we don't, we see those extremes. And we aren't as attentive to that. I hope it's a slow progression toward that place. But certainly one that we've got to reel back in and be attentive to and think a lot more about. I appreciate you raising that. Others. Okay. Well, thank you so much, um, Edith Kelly Green, for sharing your thoughts. I'll share mine as well. There are times where I'm extremely proud to be a young Black male director of an office at the University of Mississippi. There are times when that's really difficult too. Um, when intentions are questioned, or when motivations are challenged, and um, when advocacy stops short of what's needed in order to make the impact that you want to make, and when you wonder about why, those things are difficult to manage. And so the point here is that we can have these identities that, just as a lot of you all probably have examples of when you were really proud to be women, but we kind of almost blanketly talked about how that can create some challenges as well, right? And so I think the more practice we have in thinking about our own identities and being more aware of how that affects how we think about ourselves, and how we move through the world, the better we become at doing perspective taking and being able to consider how other folks might feel in situations, being able to address and mitigate those things. So I appreciate the conversation. All right, so yourself in relation to other people. So while self-awareness is really important, the real reason that inclusion matters is that we learn a lot from people who are different than us. I'm sorry. We're more productive and successful as individuals and teams when we understand more about ourselves and ourselves in relation to other folks. And we learn how to navigate in a diverse country and world, both personally and professionally. So one of the reasons that this is so important is that, you put a diverse group of people together, you put a problem in front of a diverse group of people, you're gonna solve that problem more thoroughly, more quickly, than if you've got people who come from the same lived experiences, who can only see it one way. And while there is a huge breadth of different ways that we can be diverse, it can be geography, it can be because of socioeconomic status, it can be because of those other things, there are certain identities that change just effectively how you move through the world based on how you look, based on your appearance, based on how the biases or perspectives that other people might have of you. And so it's important to think about that as you're building teams, as you are approaching new challenges. You are going to inherently get better outcomes when you prioritize getting that problem in front of a diverse group of folks who have had a diverse set of lived experiences that affect how they view that problem, how they view that situation. So my team is as strong as it is, not because I've picked so many people who think like me, but because I've picked people from different places who have different lived experiences, who can think about what we are charged to do in the Center for Inclusion from so many different ways. And they bring things to me, and things that I would have never thought of that make me a better professional. And I'm hopeful that their proximity to me does the same. It's true for you all to think about that as you're building your Ole Miss Women's Council cohorts, as you all are, engaging in your different organizations that you're in, and using the power that you're given by nature of being in those organizations to shape who gets to take advantage of those opportunities as well. So in closing, the things that I want you to take away, if the other stuff that I've said is so wordy, or if y'all are still hung up on my delivering my son at home story, that nothing else that I said resonates with you throughout the rest of the day, it's important for you to take away that we all have many different identities, even just as individuals. So again, I can't come up here and just be a man. There's never been a situation where I'm gonna go and talk in front of to a group, and all that I bring is my maleness and the things that has either subjected me to and or benefited me throughout my life. That just isn't the case. I'm also going to think about myself as a Black person, as a Black male, as one who comes from a certain level of education, as one who had a certain background, as one whose faith is central to what he does. And I think about that all the time because no one thing, no one of those identities define how I'm thinking about a situation or how I'm moving through a space. All of those things at the same time affect that. The same is true for you. Whether we think about it enough, whether we give enough credence to it is a different story, but the same is true for you. Our identities grow, they change, they evolve as we do. And so there are people on here who have known me long enough to know that I haven't always thought of myself as a dad, that I haven't always thought of myself as an educator or as somebody who has responsibility for shaping how people think about themselves and all of this. No, there was one time where I, what I needed to think about the most was keeping the mentor meetings on my calendar so I would actually show up. But these things change, they shape, they move over time, and that's important for us to think about too. Acknowledging and understanding the value of diversity as an advantage, not as a zero-sum game. No one has to lose in order for us to create opportunities for folks and for us to prioritize the real benefits that we get from bringing in diverse perspectives and really giving those perspectives and the people who have them the opportunity to thrive and participate fully in the opportunities that are there. And so when we look around us and we think about, is there a space where this person never speaks? They seem to never have any feedback or anything like that. Well, we might need to do some examination of the space. It might not be about that person, right? It might be about, have we thought enough about how to bring everybody's voice and be sure that they have a chance, an opportunity, a pathway where in their own way, they can bring forward the things that they want to contribute to this space. That is when we are really prioritizing inclusion. Again, diversity is getting everybody to the party. Inclusion is playing the songs that you think that they might want to hear. But then, equity is leaving me alone because I don't like to dance. And then, nudging the people who might want to a little bit more. And then I also, shameless plug to the Center for Inclusion. Because we have so many opportunities for you to engage in these and other topics in more depth. And so our time today was limited. We only got to talk about really exploring ourselves. And I know everybody, if we had folks participate at varying levels, that's totally okay. But hopefully the questions that we asked and the activities that we did together gave you some fodder to think about yourself. And in future times, I'm hopeful to come back and maybe be able to engage with you all about yourself in relation to others, or maybe even spend some time talking about these systems that we talked about at the beginning. Those are the takeaways. I'd like to just pause here before I put up the contact information to see if you all have any last thoughts or questions. Thank y'all so much. That's my time. My name is EJ. My email address is EJ8@OMWC.edu. This email address that's on the screen also comes to my phone as well. So feel free to use either one in order to get in contact with me. Again, Ole Miss Women's Council means so much to me. I'm so humbled every time I get an invitation to come and engage with you all in any way that you all see fit. So if you want to hear more about any of the other interesting stories that I have, I can't top the one, giving birth to my son in the apartment, but I can engage you all more on these topics, or reflect on some of my experiences as a student here at the university or as a young professional as well. And I would count it an honor to be able to do that in other spaces. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I look forward to partnering with you all in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, EJ.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Y'all get excited. Hopefully we'll be able to bring him back and be in person next time. But we do what we can here. But yes, seriously, if y'all have questions, his email, my email, we can get him questions if you want to work with them. We do have a cohort that's very central to social justice and inclusion, so might be connecting you with them, but cannot thank you enough. So this is awesome.
Pleasure was all mine. Y'all have a great day. Thank you for your time.
Yep, y'all are dismissed. Thank y'all.